In this video, we will be writing two Python codes. In the first one, we will be asking the user to provide us the number of inputs he wants to give. Then we'll take the inputs and compare between all of those which one is greatest and give the result. In the next one, we would upgrade it further to not asking the user of how many inputs he or she wants to give and directly give n number of inputs and write end or any string at the end to get their result. Let us see how our program is working. First of all, we are taking inputs, that is some numbers as shown. What our code is do is that it will check whether 10 is greater than 15. So no, 10 is not greater than 15. So it will discard 10 from its memory and keep only 15 in mind. Then it will check whether 15 is greater than 13. Yes, 15 is greater than 13. So good going, 15 is the greatest up until now. Then it is going to check whether 13 is greater than 24. Obviously not, 24 is bigger than 13. So it will discard both 13 and 15 from its memory and keep only 24 in mind. Then check whether 24 is greater than 16. Obviously yes. And once it is out of inputs, then it would print our result, which in this case would be 24. This is how our code is being executed. Now let us write the code for ourselves. First of all, let a be an integer which we are taking as input. Here we are asking the user to provide us how many number of inputs he or she has. Then we write b is equal to open box bracket and close box bracket. This means we are making b as an empty list. This empty list would then be used to store all the inputs given by our user. Then we are making a for loop for I in range starting from 0 up till a, as a is the number of inputs the user is going to provide. Then c is another input which we are taking. This would just be all the numbers that we want to take from the user for comparing. Then we are appending all of those in our list so that they are being stored in the memory. Then we define a new variable count that is equal to 1. Then in the next loop, we say that check at b on its jth location if the jth location is greater than b of the location at 1, that is count. And if so, then count is equal to j. That means the greatest number would become count. And if this is not happening, then count plus equals to 1, so that we are moving ahead in our list. And finally, print the greatest number for us. Let us execute it and check if it works. How many numbers do you have? Let's say 5. The first number 10, next 12, 13, 27, and 36. Error, list index out of range. So while writing this code, I tried multiple options. First of all, let us see what I do. Starting from count is equal to 0 because probably count is going ahead of the list. So again we give 5 inputs and again we have list index out of range error. Turns out we do not need the else part if it works this time. This time it's a value error because we are taking integer as the input and not float. So let us change that and check if our code works this time. Yes, it is giving the greatest number as the result. Let us execute it again for 8 numbers. 11, 36.2, 33, 93, 97, 97.2, 10 and 14. So we already know 97.2 is the greatest number, and that comes as our final answer. Our code is running superb. Now for the upgradation part, where we do not want to ask our user for number of inputs he has and directly begin taking inputs. So for that we will use while loop so that it keeps running until and unless the user gives a string in the input. We want our code to try to take float input, but if we do not get a float input, we get an error. Let us see which error that is so that we can write an except clause which would bypass the error. So we get type, no, that was a syntax error. So we say a is equal to float input, but instead write a string, so we get a value error. We need to bypass this error so that we can compare numbers when we are provided with a string. So when you are getting a value error, execute the part of code which finds out the greatest number among all the given inputs. D is equal to the total length of our list B, and then looping that in a for loop from 0 to D, because the length of D shows how many inputs we have. The error is name I is not defined because we copied the code from the previous one. So while taking input, we just have to remove I and write another variable, let's say P. That should do. And instead of writing P plus 1, we could start from P is equal to 1. Let us say we write a few numbers, and then we are done with giving all of our inputs. So we give a string. So we get the greatest number, voila. 42 is the greatest number, and there it is. Thank you.